Hopkins, Chair of the Historic St. Augustine Area Council of the St. Johns County Chamber. I welcome you to today's webinar, Part 2, Affordable Housing, Challenges and Opportunities in St. Johns County. To facilitate the questions and answers portion of today's discussion, we ask that you submit your questions using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. And we will address those at the end of the presentation. So I would like to now introduce today's presenters. We are pleased to have Bill Lazar, Executive Director for St. John's Housing Partnership, and Malinda Everson, Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of St. Johns County. We've asked Bill and Malinda to expand on our last council meeting that we held in May, which was a presentation from the Flagler College students participating in their Enactus program. And I think without further ado, I will turn it over to Bill and Malinda.
Good morning. This is Bill Lazar. I'm going to start off and then Malinda will tag in with us. We appreciate everybody giving us an opportunity to talk to you about what's going on. And this really initiated out of a presentation that Enactus did for y'all from Flagler College about a month ago. But it started several months ago when I met with the Chamber's Policy Committee talking about affordable housing and workforce housing. And that kind of grew into, was there a way to get the Flagler College kids involved? And then they came up with this idea. But a lot of it between February and now, things that are important for all of us to understand, is with the support of the Chamber and the county government lobbying the state of Florida, St. Johns County and the rest of Florida is getting full funding for SHIP funds, which is the first time in almost 15 years that the legislature has not stolen about money for other purposes. So St. Johns County's share of that is going to go from $1.2 million to over $2 million in SHIP funds for a year. And if we all spend it well, it could continue like that. So a lot of what Malinda and I are talking to y'all about are, what we see as affordable housing challenges in St. Johns County. And what I think is important for all of y'all to understand is when we talk about affordable housing, it's about stabilizing our workforce. It's the majority of the funds really end up looking at helping local employees remain living either in their own homes or becoming homeowners for the first time through programs like what Habitat does. If you can hit the next slide. And Malinda, you want to tell them a little bit about Habitat? Oop.
Good morning. So I appreciate all the work that Enactus has done so far in exploring affordable housing opportunities and challenges. Bill and I have been doing this kind of work for 20 plus years. Chime in, Bill, is that correct?
Yep.
So Habitat for Humanity here locally has been working on affordable housing for 27 years. And we have built out 2 neighborhoods and we're working on our 3rd, but we see the challenges every single day. People come into our office every single day and they talk about their struggles and how they just can't find the affordable housing. And that's the significant part about all of this is that we really need to be focusing on how to increase the housing stock, rental, and home ownership opportunities.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So part of what we want everybody to understand is some of the information that's important. And we always talk about affordable housing. What we're really talking about is the disparity between wages and housing prices. And, we know real estate is booming here in St. Johns County. Everybody is thrilled with that at one level, but, that rising tide does not always lift all boats. Some of the figures that we get from the University of Florida Schimberg Center will tell you that to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida right now, you need $18.71 an hour. That's about what we need here in St. Johns County. And that's assuming that person is working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. So if you're working with someone who gets part-time work or seasonal work, that makes it even harder because their housing costs are 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. So their wages need to be able to keep up with that. If someone's working minimum wage, in St. Johns County right now, for them to buy a starter home, they've literally got to work almost 99 hours a week. That's 2.5 full-time jobs. And the big part of when you look at the challenges for housing, it's what people call a high housing cost burden. And that's when you're spending more than half your income on housing. And a half your income, if you're making $100,000 and you spend half your income on housing, you still got $50,000 a year to live on. That's not bad. If you're making $25,000 a year and you spend half of that on income, it's a real struggle to pay bills, have a car note, pay insurance, and everything else. And so almost 14% of the families in St. Johns County spend more than half their income on housing. Those are folks who are one step away from a crisis. And I think as we're seeing now with this pandemic and the unfortunate layoffs that went on, a lot of folks just did not have any kind of resource savings or anything else, and it's really created a lot of problems. One of the suggestions from the Enactus students was that it'd be great if we had some kind of an easy, accessible database for housing resources. The county has a list of apartment complexes in town that have subsidized apartments. They're almost always full. It's a real struggle when people come to find housing. If they're looking for a place to rent, we get calls all over the place. If we list one of our rentals, and the Housing Partnership owns about 60 rental properties around town, we'll get 50 calls in a day of people just looking, and they're looking immediately. And there aren't great places for folks to go if I want to buy a house. How do I do it? People know about Habitat. You'd be surprised how many times you can talk to somebody and they go, oh, I didn't think I'd qualify for that. And they don't understand. They don't know enough to go and share it. One of the things that we hope comes out of this is employers see all of us as a resource to share information with their employees. One of the services the Housing Partnership provides is we're HUD certified credit counselors. So we offer classes and individual help with people who want to improve their credit, who either maybe want to buy a house and then they need that HUD certified counseling, or they just want to figure out how to properly manage their money because they didn't learn about it in school or when they were growing up. So we're always looking for partnerships that help expand the resources on what lenders in town have down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, knowing about banks that want to partner, knowing about employers that want someone to come talk to their employees about becoming homeowners is really important. Next slide. This is just, everybody always asks, what is affordable housing? And essentially these are sort of charts. It's not simple. It's basically a math problem. And affordable housing is always relative to your family size. So what we've got here are just two different things for you to look at. These come from the state of Florida. They're updated once a year. It's what the county and most of us use when we talk about affordable housing. When it says 30% area median income, that's usually for the Duval County area median income. If we did a demographic study of our working class population south of, say, State Road 210, you'd find these numbers actually going down a little bit. But these are the guidelines that are set up. So for someone in St. Johns County to be eligible to buy a home through the SHIP program, if they are at 80% of the area median income, 3 people can make up to $54,000. If you look at the housing cost below, and that's really a breakout, and I think it applies to whether it's your mortgage or your rent, that's essentially what, based on if you're working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, you take 30% of that, that's what you can afford for a house or rent. So, I put those numbers in red because if you want to just think about how many apartments or places rent in St. Johns County for less than $900 a month, there's not much. So all of those families, the folks under 50% of area median income of almost any size, can't find an affordable place to rent here in town. The big challenge with that ends up being when you think about bedrooms and you think about number of people in the household, it's increasingly hard for a single parent to make these numbers. If you have two people and they're making $18,000 a year, they might be able to make it work. If you're one parent with a child, that becomes a lot harder to do. So it's whenever people talk about affordability, it's not just the price, to the family size and the income that they have. Next slide, please. So this is just, over the years, as I've worked with people, as we've lobbied Tallahassee to leave the SHIP funds alone and everything else, it's always been characterized as one of two ways. It's either part of economic development, we need it to stabilize our workforce, or it's charity. We want to help those folks. And I think to a large degree, it's in a lot of ways. I mean, I work with a lot of senior citizens. The Housing Partnership runs a home repair program. That's been our primary business line for 25 years. And the majority of folks we help are people on fixed incomes and over 65 who need help fixing up their homes. But you stabilize them, you spend $15,000 renovating a house and giving someone a walk-in shower. And if they don't slip and fall and cost $40,000 to replace a hip, it's money well spent, and they're remaining living in their home independently. So if we get back to that 14% of St. Johns County households who are house burdened, that's 16,000 families. That's a big number. That's a lot of that's our part of our workforce. There's about 2,300 of them that are senior citizens who spend more than 50% of their income. The rest of them are working class families. And that really is one step away from a crisis before we worried about this pandemic. Another 17% of those families are spending more than 30% of their income. Those are folks that, they're the sort of critical piece of, could we get them in a good place to where they could look at buying a starter home? It's hard for them to save. It's difficult to pay down debt when you're spending more than 30% of your income, especially if your income is under $50,000 a year. And it's hard to plan for the future, but that's all what we need to stabilize our workforce. Any employer wants to know that if they invest time in training you, that you're going to be around for a while. And if you're having to hop from rental to rental, I've got an employee right now who the landlord just told him he needs to be out. They're selling the house and he's got 45 days to find another place to live. That destabilizes our workforce. It's not the landlord's fault necessarily, but my employees now got to find a place to rent. If you've got kids and you have to hunt rentals and you end up moving from school district to school district, that's very disconcerting for our kids. So, this is why it's really important. And recently, Orlando came up with a 10-year plan. And Malinda and I both think this is significant for several reasons. One of which is Orlando finally got to the point where they said, we can't kick the can down the road anymore. They really said, everybody keeps talking about affordable housing as a problem. Well, I think what happened is the employers said, we have to fix this. We can't run our business if we don't have employees to keep up with, whether it's the tourist attractions or anything else. So they've actually come up with a serious plan with a lot of vested support from local government and business leaders. They're looking at a variety of things. They've got government that's investing in land that is going to be designated to develop for workforce housing. They're looking at both short and long-term strategies. They're looking at regulatory things. They're increasing the opportunity to have accessory dwelling units or granny flats, so that, because those have always been a significant source of affordable housing, especially for folks starting out in the workforce. That used to be the case in St. Augustine. All those garage apartments downtown, all those little sort of one bedrooms off the side that have now become Airbnbs, but they were originally, meant for part of the workforce. They gave somebody, a person or a couple or two roommates, a relatively inexpensive place to live close to town. They're looking at new funding mechanisms. I know funding and taxing isn't really popular with a lot of folks, but housing is expensive, and you're not going to get it just by telling someone they need to save. Not if you look at housing prices and real estate and everything else. One of the things that they're coming up with was, now they've instituted a $250 a year annual fee on short-term rentals. It's just they're trying to generate money off of housing activities. They've got a mobility fee that'll pay impact fees. So they're looking for things like that. This is something that I think, St. Johns County is just a couple steps behind having the same kind of need. And we're just hoping that we can start working on it now rather than waiting until it becomes a crisis. I think one of our big wake-up calls may be when these 2 new hotels open up and they start hiring 100 or 150 employees. If they can't easily attract people to those jobs, they're going to raise their wages a little bit and they're going to steal them from the local businesses around them because people will move over there to a new hotel. And I think that's when we start to see the real shortage in our workforce. Next slide. So, Malinda and I are here to, tell you that it's not we need one or the other, and we need all of it. And essentially we need it all now, not bits and pieces. But this is part of what a community strategic plan looks at. It's like, okay, so what do we do and how do we do it? The county puts a lot of SHIP dollars into preserving existing housing through a SHIP rehab program. The Housing Partnership does a lot of that. The Housing Partnership, we've got 4 HUD certified counselors that for 8 years, they did nothing but 40 hours a week. They worked on foreclosure modifications for folks all over the state of Florida, but for a lot of folks here in St. Johns County, through no fault of theirs, the house went into foreclosure. And we're seeing an uptick now, even before the pandemic, mostly of seniors who owned a house, had a mortgage, and they lost a partner, and suddenly it became difficult to keep paying those bills. So, there's a lot of different opportunities that we have, but we've got to look at both rental and homeownership opportunities. There's opportunities, there's not a lot, but there are infill lots. I'm not pointing to Lincolnville, where lots, when I first started working here, went for $5,000. Now they're $100,000. But there are infill lot opportunities around. The biggest challenge is finding something that's probably got water and sewer. The county is considering opening up the accessory dwelling unit regulations to allow for more of those. They need to hear from local people, and we don't want them all to go to Airbnbs. That's kind of the county's reluctance on, if they set it up, will it just become more of an Airbnb issue? I think the city and the county have consistently missed the boat on asking new developments to be part of some kind of affordable housing. They can all say, well, we don't really have a plan, or there's no formula for it, but you can look at the 2 apartment complexes that are going up, the one that's right there at the north end of town, at the city gates, the one that's going up on 207. Both of them are market rate affordable housing. They got some waivers or variances to do what they needed to do. The one that's in the city didn't have to pay impact fees. That's a huge savings in town. And I guarantee you that their rents aren't going to be any different from the rental apartments that open up in the county. But that's a huge savings. And we missed an opportunity to negotiate with them. There's a new development that was just approved by the county. I think it's called Flagler Crossing. Again, it's a new development of single-family homes and some multifamily homes. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything, but there was no effort made there to get some kind of commitment to affordable housing. And I'm not saying that just because we want to beat up on developers, make them do it, but you've got to realize every development that goes in, if there's not an affordable housing component, it means that any other real estate around there has suddenly gone up in value, and it's that much harder for Malinda and I to look at doing affordable housing, because someone goes, oh, well, I can put in an apartment complex over here, and the real estate has suddenly just become that much more valuable to them. So, when we look at these things, there's a lot that could be done. City and county planning and zoning, both those committees could ask anytime someone comes for a waiver or any kind of an adjustment to the current land development code, they could ask for some kind of affordable housing partnership. They don't, I think in part because it's hard to figure out, but we can't just keep skipping this because we can't figure it out. Next slide. So, one of the things that the Flagler students in Enactus talked about was, the database. And the database conversation actually stood out when I was talking to them about having a database of resources. As a nonprofit developer, Malinda and I both look for land. We look for, the housing partnership, we're looking for homes to buy that we own and manage as rental property. Some we're trying to buy, fix up, and turn around and sell back to people as a first-time home, for a first-time home buyer opportunity. But we look for lending opportunities, lenders that have special rates or terms that might benefit affordable housing, lenders that might have down payment assistance. Knowing what city or county programs might encourage affordable housing. St. Johns County has been working for 2 years on an affordable housing rezoning district category, and they're just now getting it approved. It's going to be something that we hope will encourage a couple of the bigger developers to look at doing a development where 40% of the units, whether it's rental, home ownership, townhomes, whatever it is, 40% of those units will be part of some kind of affordable housing opportunity. So, having these kind of resources, knowing that land is set aside. Malinda just missed, I think, buying a piece of property that would have been Habitat's next development 2 or 3 years out. Land around here is not getting cheaper. I don't think it's going to go down in price anytime soon. And the sooner we are all able to buy or set aside land for affordable housing, whenever we develop on it, it's going to be worth it. The county has a local housing trust fund. There's about $1.5 million in it. That came from Nocatee and a couple of the other developments during the DRI days that no longer exist. They don't have to do that anymore. But there's housing dollars there that could be used creatively to help create more housing. So we want to figure out some way to put these resources in a place. We need, a committee to help us look at some of this. We need people to put their heads together and figure out, so what are our real opportunities here? There's going to be a new affordable housing apartment complex built off 207. The county's just in the middle of approving it. They are using about $11 million of the HUD disaster funds that came from Hurricane Matthew to help underwrite that. I don't know how much of it will be affordable. I know a portion of it is, and part of it is the idea is that they build it. HUD expects you to build it so that you have some market rate units and some below market rate units, so that it is able to sort of cash flow itself for the next 20 or 30 years. But the big part of it is that they have significantly lower debt coverage than the rest of us have to. Next slide. So Malinda, this is where you get to take over.
So when I moved here 16 years ago, my first job was with Bill Lazar, working at the St. John's Housing Partnership. And Bill talked about workforce housing. That was, it was something that I really hadn't heard a lot of. The community that I came from, it wasn't a big issue. And when I came here looking for a place to live, housing was 3 and 4 times the cost it was from where I used to live. And so Bill has been beating that drum for a long time, and I've learned a lot from him about what is going on in the community and how we can do things. And St. John's Housing Partnership has been a great partner with Habitat for Humanity. And we really, I look to Bill a lot and learn about what's going on and resources as well. And that's been very helpful in our most recent development, Canopy Oaks. We are building a 18-unit development off of Volusia near King Street. And this actually was something I inherited when I took over 3 years ago. And it's really important to know how long it takes to get a neighborhood like this up and running, and the resources that it takes, because it takes a lot of different steps and levels. And especially if you're a nonprofit, I look back at all the various resources and partners that we worked with, from Davidson Realty, Gulfstream Design, St. Johns County, United Way, local businesses like the St. Augustine Distillery, the Rain Tree of all sponsored homes. It takes a very big effort. And, but we're only part of that. Bill and I, we can do part of it, but there's such a huge deficit in affordable housing in this community. I believe the COC outlined that there's a 6,000 unit deficit. So what's happening, and the significance of that is with workforce housing, people are not only struggling to live here, but a lot of them aren't living here. So they're coming into this community, they're using our roads, but they're not putting tax dollars back into property taxes, they're not purchasing goods here. So they're coming into work, but they're leaving. And that also places a burden on families with children, families that, are trying to juggle it all, especially single parents trying to juggle their kids at school. So here at Habitat, we've been working really hard to increase what we're doing. But more importantly, I think the bigger picture is doing something like Orlando has done with creating a 10-year plan. And they brought together all areas of the community, from nonprofits to major employers, community partners, financial institutions. The public and private sector came up with this plan, and a lot of leaders in the community. And I think that really needs to be the next step for St. Johns County. And we need to we've identified what the need is. Now we need to come up with a plan and start doing some goal setting and set some dates and deadlines so we see that these things actually happen and not just talk about them anymore. So can you go to the next slide, please? So these are two examples of the homes in Canopy Oaks. We are building 1,100 square foot homes, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. The homes are appraised between $155 and $165. They are priced as far as a mortgage payment at no more than 30% of the homeowner's income. So that keeps them within the affordability range. We work with our homeowners from the beginning of application, and we educate them. They have to do financial literacy, budgeting, home maintenance, education. So we really try to prepare them for success and not just plunk them into a home. Many of our homeowners have seen a significant change in lifestyle. They're not spending 50 to 60%. So they're actually able to get ahead of their debt once they move into a Habitat home. Pardon me, can you move to the next slide? So some of the neighborhoods that we have developed are in West Augustine. You see the picture there of Crawford Park, and that was before I worked at this affiliate. And this affiliate worked with St. Johns County on a high level. They provided the land, they helped provide funding, the infrastructure, and that allowed us to build over 30 homes in that neighborhood. And that was a significant contribution, and that allowed Habitat to build this affordable housing. We did get help from the county for Canopy Oaks. They helped with a portion of the infrastructure, and without them, I think we'd still be raising funds. Without that, we'd still be raising funds to actually build out that neighborhood. But again, you have to look 2 and 3 years out. Right now, we're looking at our next project, and we're planning for that for 2 years from now, that we're getting ready to start and build there, because the infrastructure and raising the funds just takes a while, and developing the partnerships. Okay, the next slide. So I touched on the COC paper, the white paper that was presented to the Board of County Commissioners, and the initial goal that they outlined was doing 10% of the actual needs. So they identified 6,000 units are needed, but a doable goal would be 600 units. And I think we need to set some timelines on that, and some dates, some end dates on that. Those are 50 special needs units was part of that plan, 100 subsidized rental units, 150 very affordable rental units. And that's where Habitat comes in. Habitat, we provide mortgages. By the way, we don't just have our homeowners go out and apply for a mortgage. We actually fund the building of the house, and we hold the note. So we are the mortgage company once the homeowner closes on the home. But where we fall into this whole picture is we provide the mortgages for people within the 30 to 80% average median income. So we're looking at people who are on the lower end of the income and could never afford a $200,000 home with interest. So our homeowner payments are anywhere from $350 to about $850 per month, which you can't even barely find a rental apartment or a home here in this community. So our homes are very affordable. And then the 200 affordable ownership units that they identified, I think if we could somehow partner and make incentives with these for-profit builders. For instance, for one of our homes in Canopy Oaks, we are spending $17,000 in permits and fees. The impact fees are probably $10,000 or $11,000 of that. And it's really gotten so hard to build affordable experiences for like we did at Canopy Oaks, where we can put more houses on a big plot, where we don't need the setbacks quite as large, where there aren't really any yards, but there's a safe, decent, affordable home to live in.
Malinda, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Malinda brought up a good point. You know, people look at the cost of government regulations as a significant impact on housing, because really everything we're talking about are homes under 200,000. We all know you don't see much of those. One of the suggestions that came out of some of the discussions with this Continuum of Care subcommittee was that there are developers in the northeast, northwest part of the county that have partially or fully built out their subdivisions, and they still have impact fee credits that they have not used. And those were based on some kind of negotiated deal they had with the county. They've suggested to the county that we might be able to have them donate those impact fee credits to us, or sell them to us for like 10 cents on the dollar. The idea behind that being that they're not able to use them, it's not serving a purpose. And Malinda and I argue all day long that impact fees shouldn't be put on affordable housing. My personal feeling, impact fees are a fundraising mechanism. They're not necessarily based on anything more than that. There's a whole study that says the impact a family has on a community is what you raise the impact fee for. But nowhere in that study has Dr. McNichols ever spent any time saying, what's the impact of not having affordable housing? I think that's part of the reason why we have so much traffic and so much, impact on our roadways, is because 25% of our workforce is commuting in every day and commuting back out. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. And, there are some alternatives that could really reduce the cost of some of the affordable housing. One of the things that the Housing Partnership is looking at is there's a new down payment program through the state, offers $25,000 to $35,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That means that we can try and buy a lot, pay all those fees, build a house for $180,000, and someone's only got to finance $160,000. So these are the kind of things that we're all working on, and we just need more active support from the chamber and from other business leaders saying, we want it. The best thing we could have is a couple dozen local employees saying, I've been qualified by the bank, I'm ready to buy a house, and I can't find something in my price range, because that really motivates everybody to address that need. Go on to the next slide.
Hey, Bill, can I touch on something right there? You talked about starter homes in our community, and nobody's building starter homes, and the people who needed those and still need those are kind of staying in those. So that leaves out that whole sector, the service industry, the workforce, the people who aren't earning enough to buy a $250,000 home. There just isn't anything. And Bill and I both live down at the south end of the county, and we have both seen the traffic from the Palm Coast area and other areas out of the county. The traffic has just grown by at least 4 or 5 times. We see it when we're heading to work every morning, when we're heading home.
Yeah, that's, and this is why, we're really looking at, we need to get more people involved. Studies are important. Everybody says we got to have a vision, we got to have a study. Well, there's a half a dozen studies out now. The Continuum of Care report was given to the county in August of 2018. Elevate Northeast Florida, which a lot of the regional chamber groups have been involved in, indicates that affordable housing is going to have an impact on recruiting employees to our area. I'm on the Builders Council. We just interviewed candidates for the sheriff's office, and both the candidates indicated that they know it's a struggle for officers to live in St. Johns County. And a couple of them, a couple comments I heard was, well, we know several of our deputies are able to live here and remain here because of all the overtime they get. Now, that's the wrong solution to affordable housing, is that you've got to load up on overtime in order to be able to afford your house or your mortgage payment. And, the thing that we all have to look at is there really is a point with some of this where you're going to lose your sort of middle-class employees, the mid-level people at your business that you're training to take over a significant part of whatever your business may be. If they can't find a house here, they're going to get that training, whether it's a deputy sheriff or someone in the fire department. They're going to get that training. They're going to boost their resume over the next 4 or 5 years. And then they're not stupid. They're going to buy a house in another county, and then they're going to look for a similar job closer to home. And then we start the retraining process all over again. So this is really where I think affordable housing will have a major impact on employers. I think this is why we're seeing the initiative in Orlando, is because they've just said, we need to stabilize our workforce. We want our people vested. If they want to buy a home, the sooner they buy a home, the sooner we know they're not going anywhere and that they're going to remain with us for a long time. So we need y'all, we need people to advocate for affordable housing with the city and the county, asking both of them and anyone on the PZA, what can you do to help with this? Builders or developers, if there are landlords, there's a ton of, nonprofits in town that are always trying to place somebody in a more affordable, place to live. And we need ideas on raising funds, on finding land. I can't tell you how many times I have people call me up and say, I've got some land I'd really like to sell you for affordable housing. And when they tell me what they want for it, I go, that's why it's not affordable. I don't blame them for not trying to get their, retirement funds out of it. But when you do that, and given the real estate around here, that makes it really hard for us to keep something affordable. So we're looking for all sorts of ideas and opportunities. We're hoping that this discussion maybe opens up an opportunity for an ongoing committee or some kind of regular discussion. There are a number of nonprofits in town that work on this, but I can tell you, when Malinda and I are the primary developers of affordable housing, there's a problem. Not because we don't do a good job, but because we don't have enough other folks involved in this.
Right.
Next slide. I wanted to put this up there as just part of the last part of our presentation. Most of y'all may know about this, but the county has emergency funds, and now they're looking at this new CARE Act. The state just announced that some of that money is going to be coming down soon. There are funds there to help local residents, whether they're homeowners or renters who have been impacted by this layoff, shutdown, virus, however you want to look at it. And before they fall into crisis, we need to, have them contact the county. The number's there at the screen, I believe, and it's on the county website. Tell people to ask for help. If you've got employees that are coming to you telling you that, they're a little short, they got to try and make rent, I think it's great if you help them out, but get them to call the county too. See if they can qualify for one of these programs. I know there's a small business administration grant out there, but the county has that hotline set up to help local residents, catch up on their mortgage or on their rent. The Housing Partnership has got credit counselors who can help people sort out if they're really struggling, figuring out what can we afford to pay for. We need to be able to share that, with folks, those ideas. How do I do this? One of the things that happened in the last recession was that people got forbearance on their mortgage payments by the banks for 3 months. And then at the end of the third month, the bank said, well, now all 4 months are due. That wasn't what the homeowner understood. And some of those folks went into foreclosure because they just couldn't get caught up. Now, some of the banks may be looking at that. Not all banks are the same. Not all mortgage companies are dealing with it the same way. So we've got to be prepared over the next 12 months for employees who own their homes, who may have had to struggle with their mortgage payment and it may have gone into forbearance. They may be at risk of foreclosure if they don't get help properly negotiating how they're going to modify their mortgage.
Bill, another resource that's not listed on there is legal aid. Megan has spoke out at various meetings saying that if you have a situation, there is a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures right now, but there are some landlords maybe that aren't following the rules. So you could reach out to legal aid as well, or you could recommend somebody reach out to legal aid.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. And I think the last slide. What's next? Yep. So that's our phone numbers. Please, if any of you we're here to answer questions for a little while, whatever we can, but give us a call. If you've got ideas, if you've got someone who needs help, if you want to help yourself or want to give us some ideas, please give us a call. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Bill and Malinda. And to let you all know that Andrea will be emailing out today's presentation to all of you that are on the Zoom meeting today. So you have that as a resource. Please share it with your employees that are looking for housing and any other folks in our community that are in need. We will open up the call to your questions. If you would enter them in the chat, then I can relay those to Bill and Malinda. So we had that question about would we be able to email the presentation out? Yes, Andrea will do that. Are there any other questions? I have a question here, Bill and Malinda. What would you see as the steps as we as a community should take? I think you might have answered that in that second to the last slide or so, but can you expound on that again for a minute?
I think this is one of these things where I think it's all hands on deck. The county and the city both need to hear from our community that we don't want to keep kicking the can down the road. This is not an easy conversation to have. There's no simple solution. Housing is expensive any way you look at it. But we need, the EDC is a great place to start. The chamber, represents businesses all up and down this community who have employees. Affordable housing, as much as I've always used it to help low-income seniors stay in their homes, affordable housing is all about stabilizing our workforce. And that's our employees. They need to know. I love walking around town and having someone tell me that SHIP funds helped them buy their house 20 years ago. And they're still in the house, they're still here, they're still working. I mean, those are the things that are proof positive that the program works. We need to expand it. We need to really get a hold of people. I guarantee you, Malinda and I have been doing this for a while. I've been talking in St. Johns County about affordable housing for 25 years, and I can walk into probably any business in town and find someone who's never heard about affordable housing, who never thought that they might qualify. I've had county employees who go, well, I can't apply for that because I work for the county. And I'm going, no, ma'am. I said, no, sir. We need to get the word out, and we need an ongoing, whether we can figure out a committee or some kind of a network. The continuum of care works with a lot of the different homeless providers. They're dealing with one aspect of what our community needs, but there's a lot we need for the entire workforce. And working with the Board of Realtors, the Builders Council, we're open to ideas on how we can expand this. I think the example of what they did in Orlando is what Malinda and I just recently sort of fixated on, because they probably had those conversations for several years before they came up with a 10-year plan. But that's what we need. And our goal is, let's start developing it now before it really bites us in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question. Are there major employers in the county who acknowledge the affordable housing issue and are willing to get involved?
I have spoken with a number of employers locally, and they all acknowledge there's an issue. They talk to their employees who are struggling and maybe can't make ends meet or are commuting. And I think once we get an organized effort, they definitely need to be at the table because it stabilizes their business if they have a stabilized workforce.
Right, good. Is there a formal program that a landlord could participate in order to be able to deliver affordable housing to a family? Are there tax incentives or just the knowledge of where to point their potential tenant?
I think that's one of the things the Continuum of Care has been trying to work on a little bit. They're trying to get a list of landlords to help. In different counties, people have negotiated different ways to try and help landlords who want to be part of an affordable housing program. So I think we need landlords to step up and say, I'd be interested. And a lot of times, you know, I think what helps is give somebody a suggestion. You never know when it might go, oh, okay, we'd be willing to help do that. There might be tax incentives. I don't know how they could do that directly. I know if you're in the historic district, if you do historic renovations, they give you a tax break. I'm not sure if that's something that the county could look at or the city, but it'd be worth venturing a question just to see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. So reminder, you will all receive this presentation, and I hope you'll reach out to Bill and Malinda if you have an interest in volunteering to help create some sort of resource for people to know what programs are available and how to get involved, maybe chatting with your local politicians, with county executives to encourage them to help in some way. That would be terrific. I'd really like to thank Bill and Malinda for taking their time.
Thank you.
We appreciate you expanding on last month's topic. And I encourage you all to visit the Chamber's website, sjcchamber.com. And the Chamber is putting out a lot of information on everything involving the county, so please use that as a resource. And we will not meet in July and August. This council typically does not meet through the summer, but we will meet back in September. And I'm hoping very much that we're back at the Art Association. Compliments of Diane Bradley, who allows us to meet there, and we greatly appreciate that. And I think that's all I have today, unless Bill or Malinda, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you very much. We really appreciate this time. And please feel free to call either one of us or both of us. If you've got ideas, you want to help, if you want to refer someone to us, either because they want to get involved or they need help, we've got people who will try and help sort things out.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
We'll end today's meeting. We appreciate all of you participating.